Hello, doctors. Welcome back to Pirates of Medicine. Today, we are going to start with our biochemistry base again. This is going to be the fifth video in this series. We're going to continue from where we left in the last video. Before we start, I would like to ask you all that how's your preparation going on? I hope you are studying and you're on track. If you have any doubts and if you need any consultation, feel free to comment in the comment section down below. Otherwise, you can also contact us on our Instagram or our Facebook. The links or the usernames are on the bottom part of your screen. And also, if you join our Instagram and Telegram, you'll see that we post daily quizzes and quick revision notes over there. So you can consider doing that. The usernames are on the bottom part of your screen. So without any further ado, let's begin. So the 46th question today is that a 20-year-old patient complains of general weakness, dizziness, quick fatigability. Blood analysis results are that the hemoglobin level is around 80 gram per liter. Microscopically, exam results are erythrocytes are of modified form. This condition might be caused by. So remember, there are some pathologies in which the shape of RBCs changes from its biconcave normal shape. Let's see what those pathologies are and what those pathological shapes are. So here you can see like some classical change shapes of RBCs. First of all, we have this target cell shape. You can see this looks like a bullseye, and this target cell is classical characteristic of thalassemia. It can be seen post-splenectomy and also in liver diseases or iron deficiency, but it is a characteristic of thalassemia. Then we have our shape of an elliptocyte. It is seen classically in hereditary elliptocytosis, in some hemoglobinopathies, sometimes in iron deficiency anemias, in myelofibrosis and megaloblastic anemias as well. Then we have stomatocyte shape. You can see this in liver diseases and alcoholism. Then we have ovalocyte. It is seen in Southeast Asian ovalocytosis, sometimes in impaired DNA synthesis related macroovalocytes like in B12 and folate deficiency anemias. Then we have our friend over here, sickle cell. This obviously is seen in sickle cell disease or hemoglobin sickle cell disease, this sickle-like shape. Then we have a keratocyte, horn cell. This is seen in microangiopathic hemolytic anemias like in DIC or disseminated intravascular coagulation, in which your body coagulates and forms clots and forms like the coagulation system is decreased at the same time. So there are other shapes as well, but we'll focus on these only. And according to a question, all of these options, out of these, only sickle cell anemia has a modified erythrocyte shape. That is why the answer is sickle cell anemia. Let's go to the next one. A 48-year-old patient complained about intense pain, slight swelling, reddening of skin over the joints. Temperature rose up to 38 degrees Celsius. Blood analysis revealed high concentration of urates. This condition might be caused by disturbed metabolism of, they're asking. So remember, urates or uric acid is formed during the purine salvage pathway. This purine salvage pathway is just the degradation of purine nucleotides. You know, we have two types of nitrogenous bases which form nucleosides and nucleotides, the purines and pyrimidines. Purines contain adenine and guanine nucleotides and nucleosides, and pyrimidine we have cytidine, uracil and thymidine. So here we have purine salvage pathway, and you can see over here these purine nucleotides are converted into respective nucleosides, which are converted into hypoxanthine, and this hypoxanthine is converted into xanthine oxidase, and which forms xanthine, and xanthine is converted finally into urate. So when there is an increased degradation of these purine nucleotides, it leads to hyperuricemia or increased amount of uric acid or urates in the blood. So that is the characteristic thing which is seen in our patient over here, that these hyperuricemia has caused deposition of urates on the joints, which has caused pain, swelling and reddening of the skin over the joints. So this caused This condition is caused by disturbed metabolism of purines. Next question we have is a bit trick, so please stay with me on this. A patient has yellow skin color, dark urine and dark yellow feces. What substance will have strengthened concentration in the blood serum? So remember, we have three types of jaundice that cause yellowish or coloring of urine and the skin. We have prehepatic type, we have intrahepatic type, and we have posthepatic type. The prehepatic type is due to excessive hemolysis leading to increased bilirubin delivered to the liver. Now this bilirubin that is delivered is in unconjugated form. So then we have intrahepatic, which is due to some disorder in the liver which leads to defective conjugation or impaired cellular uptake or abnormal secretion. Then we have posthepatic, which is due to mechanical obstruction of the bile flow. So after the liver has formed the conjugated bile, because you know that conjugation occurs in the liver, and the unconjugated bile is connected with or joined with a glucuronic acid molecule, and conjugated bile is formed. So after it has formed, there may be posthepatic because of obstruction of the bile duct, which has caused its impaired excretion. In this case, the elevated bilirubin in the blood serum will be conjugated because it's already been formed. In intrahepatic, both can be increased. So remember, unconjugated bilirubin is hydrophobic, so it is not excreted in urine. That is why you can see that the urine color in prehepatic is normal, but conjugated bilirubin is hydrophilic and can be excreted in urine. So you can see over here, urine color is dark. But the conjugated bile or the conjugated bilirubin specifically cannot change the color of the feces, stool, because conjugated bilirubin is not being able to convert it into stercobilin, which gives the color to the stool. But unconjugated bilirubin can. Therefore, in prehepatic and intrahepatic, the stool is of normal yellowish or brownish color you normally see. But characteristic of posthepatic or obstructive type of jaundice is that the stool is of white or acholic color. So the trick question over here is, in the question they gave that the skin color is yellow, the urine is dark, and the feces are dark. Now you can see, if you see over here, unconjugated bilirubin when increased gives normal color to the urine, but stool color is also normal or dark. But over here, other option is dark urine, which is according to the question, but the stool over here should be acholic, which is not according to the question. So remember, that is why even in this case the urine is dark and the stool color is normal. So this dark color of the dark color of stool is due to unconjugated bilirubin. That is why you should choose unconjugated bilirubin, because conjugated bilirubin when increased will cause acholic feces. But over here, unconjugated bilirubin causing urine dark color and normal color of stool. That is why the answer is elevated bilirubin is unconjugated. Correct? Understood? Let's go to the next one. So in 49th, a patient has increased pyruvate concentration in the blood. A large amount of it is excreted with the urine. What vitamin is lacking in this patient? So I told you, we have done this question before, that vitamin B1 or thiamine has a coenzymic form of thiamine pyrophosphate. This thiamine pyrophosphate is a cofactor for pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. This pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, which converts pyruvate into acetyl coenzyme A. So if there is a deficiency of vitamin B1, this will lead to inhibition of conversion of pyruvate to acetyl coenzyme A, which will lead to pyruvate accumulation in the body. Understood? So let's go to the next one. So ammonia is a very toxic substance, especially for the nervous system. What substance takes the most active part in ammonia detoxification in the brain tissues? So remember, ammonia is formed in various parts of the body, and there are some transport substances that take ammonia from that part of the body and take it to the liver for detoxification or urea cycle. So in brain, ammonia is taken up by glutamic acid or glutamate, as we call it, by the enzyme glutamine synthetase. They are converted into glutamine and water is given out. Now this glutamine travels to the liver via the blood and undergoes the process of deamination by the help of enzyme glutaminase. So in this case, ammonia is removed and it goes into the urea cycle or the ornithine cycle and takes part in that way. So glutamine or glutamate is responsible for taking up ammonia from the cerebral tissue. That is why the answer over here is glutamic acid. So next question is that a patient has pellagra. Interrogation revealed that he had lived mostly on maize for a long time and eaten little meat. The disease had been caused by the deficit of the following substance in the maize. So remember I told you when we talked about vitamin B3 or the niacin-nicotinic acid that it can be converted by tryptophan in the body. The NAD on the coenzyme form can be synthesized by tryptophan. So maize or corn is a diet in which there is very less amount of tryptophan. So people who just staple diet is corn or maize, they will have less amount of tryptophan in their body, which will ultimately lead to deficiency of niacin. And you all know niacin deficiency results in a condition called pellagra. 4 Ds are the symptoms: dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and ultimately death. So in this person who is eating corn will lead to deficiency of tryptophan and will cause pellagra because tryptophan content is low in the maize or corn. Next question over here is that increased production of thyroid hormones T3 and T4, weight loss, tachycardia, psychic excitement, and so on present on thyrotoxicosis. How do thyroidal hormones affect energy metabolism in the mitochondria of the cells? So to understand this, we need to go a bit deeper into the energy production by ATP synthesis and the process of oxidative phosphorylation. So remember, the first process in the process of ATP synthesis is the biological oxidation of certain substrates. So you can see over here, these biological oxidation substrates like carbs, fatty acids, and amino acid are being oxidized into carbon dioxide and water, and in the process they are coupled with some other portion which converts this energy into ATP. So over in our body it is coupled with electron transport chain. What electron transport chain is, we'll learn it in a bit, but remember, biological oxidation is an energy producing reaction in living cells and it is coupled with reduction reaction. Normally when these substances are oxidized, it leads to a release of some heat energy as well, but this is coupled with electron transport chain in our body. By these electron carriers, they take the protons or electrons to the electron transport chain, and the process of ATP synthesis is done over here. So what is the electron transport chain? It is a series of protein complexes that transfers electron from the electron donors to the electron receptors via a redox reaction and couples this electron transport with the transfer of protons across a membrane. To understand this, imagine this is a football team starting from here, and this is the ultimate goalie. So what the electron transport chain does is that from the substrate it takes up an electron, it passes the electron to the next player. Next player is NAD, then to the next player is FMNH2, then to the next, which is ferrous sulfate, then to the coenzyme Q. So they are passing this electron to the next player, which are known as electron carriers. Then cytochrome B, then FES again, cytochrome C1, cytochrome C, cytochrome A, cytochrome A3, and finally the goalie over here, oxygen, or the striker over here I should say, this oxygen finally accepts the electron and completes this chain and scores a goal to form water. Now what is the significance of this passing of electron that is going on? When these players or these guys over here, they are passing the ball or the electron in question to one another, what they are doing is that they are creating a proton gradient across the membrane. Let's see how this proton gradient is formed. So you can see over here that this is a TCA cycle going in the cytoplasm. During the TCA cycle, various NAD and FADH2 are formed. Now this FAT, they carry this proton or the electron to the first complex of the ETC. They give the hydrogen over here, and the first complex takes the electron and passes it to the next one, and during this process it transfers the hydrogen into the inner mitochondrial membrane, the space between the inner mitochondrial space between the inner membrane and the outer membrane. So next, it is passed, then again cytochrome 2 takes FADH2, passes one hydrogen into it. Then cytochrome Q takes the electron, passing it to the third complex. Then the third complex again passes the hydrogen into the membrane. So this way, when they are passing electron, they are creating a gradient of protons or hydrogen ions in the space between the two membranes. Now what happens is that in the fifth complex, there occurs a process called as oxidative phosphorylation. In this process, this cytochrome 5, this complex 5 of electron transport chain is a special complex. What its function? Its function is that this is the site where ATP synthesis takes place. What it does, because there is a high concentration of proton over here, this acts as a proton acceptor, and hydrogen ions comes inside it, and when it comes inside it, it rotates it. You understand? There is a large amount of hydrogen gathering in this space, and this is the only way they can move out. So when they move out through this, it rotates it in a way, and due to this conformational rotation, ADP combines with the inorganic phosphate to form ATP. So hydrogen ion is the fuel that helps it to move, and during its moving, it forms ATP from ADP and IP. So this process is known as oxidative phosphorylation, and you can see over here that it is coupled, or it is occurring together with the electron transport chain. Understood? Good. Let's go to the next one. So you can see that the mitochondrial transport of electrons is tightly coupled with oxidative phosphorylation or ATP synthesis in the fifth complex. I told you about it. So in other words, oxidation or the process of transfer of electron and the phosphorylation, they proceed simultaneously or together. But there are certain compounds that can uncouple the electron transport from the oxidative phosphorylation. So there are some substances which can uncouple these two, this part and the fifth part. What happens after this uncoupling? The significance of this is that these uncouplers, first of all, how do they do this? They increase the permeability of the inner mitochondrial membrane to protons. This is why the protons that go out come in from the inner mitochondrial membrane again. So the gradient is not formed, and this cannot work. What is the significance of this process? The significance is that these substances, the energy linked with the transport of electrons is given out as heat, and it is not used to form ATP. So energy is not formed, but it is given out as heat. Now this is very important in certain cold regions. Like this process of uncoupling you can see in polar bears, or in certain hibernating animals, or even in our babies or people who are adapted to cold. So this process uncouples electron transport chain from the oxidative phosphorylation. There are certain chemical couplers like 2,4-dinitrophenol, dinitrocresol, phenylhydrazone, aspirin in high doses even can occur as a chemical uncoupler. But there are some physiological uncouplers that we need to know. First of them is thermogenin. Then we have the thyroid hormones T3 and T4, and even some long chain free fatty acids can uncouple electron transport chain and the oxidative phosphorylation. So in the question, they asked us that there is high amount of thyroid hormones. So how do they affect energy metabolism? They disconnect oxidation and oxidative phosphorylation, or you can also say this as they uncouple electron transport chain from oxidative phosphorylation, and in this way energy is not produced, but it is dissipated as heat. So that's the whole work of these thyroid hormones as uncouplers over here. I hope you understood the whole process of uncoupling. Let's go to the next one. So 53 question is that a patient with high rate of obesity was advised to use carnitine as a food additive in order to enhance fat burning. So what is the role of carnitine in the process of fat oxidation? So to understand this, we need to understand fat oxidation, how it occurs in the first place. So we understood in the question before, the biological oxidation occurs with, it may occur with carbs, it may occur with proteins, it may occur with fatty acids. So now we are focusing on how fatty acids are used to produce energy. So fatty acids are mostly oxidized by beta oxidation, which means that during it is a chemical bioorganic chemistry thing, that the second or the beta carbon is oxidized in this process. So it occurs in 3 stages. First stage is activation of fatty acids, which occurs in the cytosol. So before the whole oxidation, they need to be activated. Then the transport of fatty acids into the mitochondria, where the actual process occurs. Then the beta oxidation proper in the mitochondrial matrix. One thing to note is that fatty acids are oxidized by most of the tissues in the body, but some tissues like brain, RBCs, and even adrenal medulla cannot utilize fatty acids from energy requirement. So they solemnly depend on glucose for their energy requirements. So anyway, the first process is activation of fatty acids. So fatty acid, this is a normal fatty acid molecule. It is activated by the two-step process. First, thiokinase converting into acyl adenylate, and then it is being converted by adding of coenzyme ASH into acyl coenzyme A. So this is the activated form of fatty acid. Now the second step, we understood that it is a transport of this fatty acid into the mitochondria. So the thing is that the inner mitochondrial membrane is impermeable to fatty acids. So we need to use a specialized shuttle system or carnitine carrier system or carnitine shuttle to transport fatty acids from the cytosol to mitochondria. Think of the carnitine as a bus. So carnitine, what it does is it takes the acyl coenzyme A, or the activated fatty acid, and for this process it uses the enzyme carnitine acyl transferase, and it forms a bond with acyl carnitine with the acyl coenzyme A to form acyl carnitine. Now this acyl carnitine can be easily transported into the mitochondrial matrix. After it has been transported, it goes away from the acyl coenzyme A, which is again formed and undergoes the process of biological oxidation. But when the carnitine, it can come out and continue this cycle again. So this is the process of carnitine shuttle. So what is the function of carnitine? Transport of fatty acids into the mitochondria. So next occurs the whole process of fatty acid oxidation. Fatty acids are converted by various enzymes. You can see in the mitochondria, they are converted into various intermediate products. And finally, what happens is in each phase of the cycle, acetyl coenzyme A molecule is given out, which goes to the Krebs cycle. The remaining part over here goes back and continues the cycle until and unless all molecules or all the long fatty acid chains are converted into acetyl coenzyme A, which enters the Krebs cycle to form energy ATP by the process of oxidative phosphorylation that we understood in the last question. So I hope you understood the role of carnitine. That was the whole point. So next question is that an experimental animal that was kept on protein-free diet developed fatty infiltration of the liver, in particular as a result of deficiency of methylating agents. This is caused by disturbed generation of following metabolite. So we have done this question before, not exactly, but we know some lipotropic factors that hasten the removal or decrease of fat or decrease the deposition of fat in the liver through their interaction with fat metabolism. So they are like those guys in the factory which check if the machinery that is going on is working in good condition. So they check that if the fat coming in the liver is the same as the amount of fat going away from the liver. So these compounds are lipotropic agents like choline, methionine, inositol, glycine, betaine, folic acid, and vitamin B12. So these are the people or the not people, but these are the agents, lipotropic agents, which are responsible for looking that the fat is not stored or deposited in the liver, and they ask the fat that if you are coming, then you should do something and then go away. So what is the lipotropic action of choline? It is used for synthesis of neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and it is also involved in methyl group metabolism, which is responsible for phospholipid synthesis, and that is why fat is used for phospholipid synthesis and choline plays a major part in it. So the fat coming for phospholipid synthesis will go away more by making phospholipids, and this occurs when choline asks them by helping them in the methylation by the process of forming SAM. We did this question before in methionine that SAM is responsible for phospholipid synthesis. So this is how choline acts as a lipotropic agent. So the next question is that a patient consulted the doctor about symmetric dermatitis of open skin areas. It was found that the patient lived mostly on cereals and ate too little milk, egg, and meat. What vitamin deficiency is the most evident? Same question. Symmetric dermatitis of open areas is a symptom of pellagra, the first D, and the patient is not eating milk, meat, and eggs, which are the source of vitamin B3 or niacin. So that is why they will have pellagra, and that is the reason. Next question is that a 46-year-old patient suffering from cholithiasis developed jaundice. Her urine became dark yellow and feces became colorless. Remember, when feces become colorless, the blood serum will have highest concentration of conjugated bilirubin. So this is also obstructive jaundice because cholithiasis is formation of stone in the bile, even in the gallbladder. So this will lead to elevation of conjugated bilirubin. Understood? We understood in this table that in conjugated elevation, the feces are colorless or alcoholic. Good. So the 57th question is that a 46-year-old patient applied to a doctor complaining about joint pain that becomes stronger the day before weather changes. Blood exam revealed strength and concentration of uric acid. The most probable cause of this disease is intensified disintegration of falling substance. So remember, uric acid is increased. Hyperuricemia, I told you, uric acid has to do with the purine salvage pathway or degradation of purines, which forms uric acid or urates. And out of all the options, only purine nucleotide is adenosine monophosphate. All others are pyrimidine nucleotide, which do not form uric acid when they are degraded. Understood? Let's go to the next one. A 42-year-old man suffering from gout has increased levels of urinary acid in the blood. Allopurinol was prescribed to decrease the level of urinary acid. They are talking about uric acid. The competitive inhibitor of what enzyme is allopurinol? So remember, allopurinol, you will study this in pharmacology, that allopurinol is a competitive inhibitor of xanthine oxidase. So it competitively inhibits xanthine oxidase and it obviously stops the reaction over here. Xanthine and uric acid are not formed. So amount of purine will be increased in the body. So it is used for treatment of gout and uric acid levels will be decreased because of allopurinol. So this is why it is used for treatment of gout. Understood? Let's go to the next one. A 58-year-old patient suffers from rheumatism in its active phase. What laboratory characteristic of blood serum is of diagnostic importance in case of this pathology? So this is a case of like rheumatism. It is a acute disease. It is in active phase. So there are these certain plasma proteins which occur in acute phase. These are called as acute phase proteins. So these refer to non-specific response to the stimulus, acute phase response. It refers to the non-specific response to the stimulus of infection, injuries, various inflammatory conditions, and even cancer. So what happens in this phase? In this phase, there are some certain changes in the certain plasma proteins which are referred to as acute phase proteins like alpha-1 antitrypsin, ceruloplasmin, complement proteins, and most importantly C-reactive proteins. In the acute phase also there is some decrease of synthesis of some plasma proteins which are known as negative acute phase proteins like albumin and transferrin. So we'll talk about CRP. C-reactive protein or CRP is a major component of acute phase protein. It is produced in the liver like all proteins, and it is present in the circulation in very less concentration like less than 1 milligram per deciliter. But during inflammation or any infectious process, it has increased amount. So it is involved. What is its function? It is involved in promotion of immune system by activating the complement system or complement cascade. So in inflammation or over here in rheumatism, it will be increased and it can act as a non-specific marker or non-specific diagnostic marker in this case. Understood? Let's go to the next one. So a patient experienced increased susceptibility to the skin to the sunlight. His urine after some time became dark red. What is the most likely cause of this? So we studied some porphyrias in the first video of this series. I told you porphyrias are a disorder of heme synthesis. Porphyrias are also called as vampire diseases because the people who have porphyrias are very photophobic. So let's see what other symptoms of porphyria are there. So first of all, the most characteristic symptom of porphyria is dark or reddish urine. The porphyrins or the products that of the heme synthesis will be in like urobilinogen or porphobilinogen will be elevated in the urine and they get oxidized to form porphyrins which give the blood a red color. So that is why the color of the urine is red. Other than that, the patient has some central effects or central symptoms like anxiety, depression, confusion, seizures, hallucinations, and insomnia. Cutaneous symptoms are more characteristic, like there occur some lesions on the skin which is exposed to the sun that occur in specifically hereditary porphyria and variegate porphyria. Another important system is photophobia. Other autonomic and peripheral systems is nausea, vomiting, hypertension, tachycardia, constipation, and severe diffuse abdominal pain, or even peripheral like muscle weakness, neuropathic pain, sensory loss, paralysis can occur, respiratory paralysis can occur. But the most characteristic, most seen symptom of porphyrias are reddish color of urine, there is photophobia from light, there can occur skin lesion, and also some central nervous system symptoms. So the 61 question is that a patient with serious muscular tissue damage was admitted to the traumatological department. What biochemical urine index will be increased in this case? So remember, creatinine over here is the storage. It is creatine. It is the storage form of phosphocreatine is the storage form of energy or ATP in the tissue. It is an energy rich compound. It is stored in muscle and brain, and it is the storage form of high energy phosphates. So you can see during ATP synthesis what happens is that this creatine takes phosphate from ATP so that it can be stored, and when it's needed it gives back the phosphate to the ATP, and the enzyme that takes part in this is creatine phosphokinase. So it takes the phosphate from the ATP and makes creatine phosphate, and when it is required it gives back the phosphate so that ATP can be produced back, and it can do the functions of muscle contraction, active transport, biosynthesis, and phosphorylation. So this is elevated or not elevated, this is stored in high concentration in muscle and brain tissue. So in case of any muscular injury, the creatinine will be elevated in the blood serum and its excretion will be elevated in urine, because in muscle injury, the substances in the muscle cells will get into the blood and will be elevated and will be excreted into the urine in increased elevated form. So that is why the answer over here is creatinine, which can actually be used as a diagnostic marker in this case. So next is that 62 question, that 12 hours after an acute attack of retrosternal pain, a patient presented a jump of AST, aspartate aminotransferase activity in blood serum. What pathology is the deviation typical for? So remember, we did this question in the last video. There are certain enzymes which can act as a biological marker. These are known as cardiac enzymes for myocardial infarction. So first enzyme to get elevated is creatinine kinase, MB form, MB isoenzyme form, and the aspartate aminotransferase, and then the lactate dehydrogenase, first form and second form. So these cardiac enzyme elevations, they show that the heart tissue is injured, and that is why they can act as markers for myocardial infarction attack. That is why the answer over here is myocardial infarction. 63 question is that the donor skin transplantation was performed to the patient with extensive burns. On 8th day, the graft became swollen and changed color. On the 11th day, graft rejection started. What cell takes place in this process? So remember, T lymphocytes are the immune component system that takes part during the graft rejection. So T lymphocytes are responsible for graft rejection, always remember. Correct? I think that sums it up. So the next question is that a 30-year-old woman had been ill for a year when she felt pain in the area of joints for the first time. They got swollen and the skin above them became reddened. There was provisional diagnosis is rheumatoid arthritis. So one of the most probable causes of this disease is structural alteration of connective tissue protein. So during rheumatoid arthritis, it is a chronic autoimmune progressive inflammation disorder of unknown etiology. We don't know the cause. And it is characterized by polyarticular symmetrical joint movements, which means many joints which are symmetrically involvement, and systemic manifestation. What they mean is that it is an autoimmune progressive and chronic disease. It occurs for a long time. It is chronic, and it is the inflammatory autoimmune diseases. Our own body, our own immune system is responsible for it. And what they mean by polyarticular symmetrical joint involvement means that it occurs in the both joints at the same time of the left and right part of the body. So if there is rheumatoid arthritis, then your left and right knee both will have the characteristic symptoms. So it's symmetrical. So the cause is unknown, but it is believed that it may be hereditary or genetically inherited. Now, it is a connective tissue disease characterized by destruction of the collagen fibers, leading to degradation of the joint cartilage and subsequently the underlying bone. You can see this is a normal bone, cartilage, and this meniscus between the femur and the tibia. And also you can see this rheumatoid arthritis. There is bone erosion, the synovial membrane is inflamed, the cartilage is slowly wearing away, and the space between the joint is reduced, which is seen in rheumatoid arthritis, and all of this is due to destruction of the collagen fibers. So that is why the answer over here is structural alteration of collagen. So the next question is that autopsy of a 12-year-old girl revealed multiple cutaneous hemorrhages, mostly into the skin of buttocks, lower extremities, serous and mucous membrane hemorrhages, cerebral hemorrhages, adrenal glands show focal necrosis and massive hemorrhages. Kidneys show necrotic nephrosis, suppurative arthritis, and erythrocyclitis, vasculitis. So this 12-year-old girl is having a lot of trouble, and you can see that there are a lot of hemorrhages going on in this patient or in this 12-year-old patient. So what is the most probable diagnosis? So out of all these, the most sensible answer to choose is meningococcemia, which is a septic infection of the blood. What happens in meningococcemia is it is a gram-negative blood infection and it causes disseminated intravascular coagulation syndrome. In this syndrome, I told you before that in this syndrome the clotting and the anti-clotting system of the body, they work simultaneously. So there are increased hemorrhages because the anticoagulating system is working, and also there are clots formed at the same time because the coagulating system is working. So DIC can cause ischemic tissue damage when upstream thrombi obstruct blood flow, and at the same time hemorrhage because clotting factors are exhausted. So small bleeds into the skin can cause petechial characteristic rash which appears star-like shape, which you can see in the skin of buttocks and lower extremities like this. And also because this hemorrhage can occur in various organs, this will cause hemorrhagic like characteristic hemorrhages, like here it was seen in adrenal glands, kidneys, and also mucous membranes and cerebrum, the brain as well. So this is a septicemia, which is specifically meningococcemia. Coccemia means increased amount in the blood. So there is increased amount of these meningococcus bacteria in the blood, which will cause DIC, which is the reason of this characteristic symptom that was seen in this 12-year-old girl. So firstly, the symptoms are normal of an infection, fever, nausea, myalgia, but then septic shock, purpura, hypotension, cyanosis, petechiae, seizures, and multiple organ dysfunction syndrome can occur. Also, in extreme conditions, acute respiratory distress syndrome and mental state alteration can also occur. I hope you understood that DIC is the cause of massive hemorrhage in the patient we have in the question, and this occurs due to meningococcemia. So that is all for today, guys. I hope you liked the video and you understood all the questions. If you have any doubts or if you have any questions, please drop down a comment below. And also I hope that you are studying well. If you want to take like more of our content, please consider following us on our Instagram and joining our Telegram channel to have that daily bit of quizzes going on and get our quick revision notes. So anyway, it's been good. See you in the next one.